It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. Thank you so much for joining us. Cleveland's long underutilized lakefront will be transformed as bold plans are moving from imagination stage to implementation phase. The football stadium won't be part of the plan, but public spaces, retail, restaurants, even an indoor-outdoor concert venue quite possibly will. A local firm, DiGeronimo Companies, was chosen this week to lead the development effort. Frustrated teachers in Cleveland's public schools are calling for stepped-up security after a rash of car break-ins in school lots while class is in session. We're not talking about a handful of break-ins, 100 cars. One was stolen. Ohio requires colleges to teach only the phonics-based science of reading method of literacy education to future teachers. But many, including Cleveland State, still use other methods, according to a recent audit. Governor Mike DeWine vows a crackdown. And Akron officials spent 2 years searching for the site of a new police headquarters and finally announced the site this week, the old headquarters. The police are staying put, and the Harold K. Stubbs Justice Center will get $67 million worth of renovations. Joining me to discuss those stories and more from IdeaStream Public Media, criminal justice reporter Matt Richman is with us. Hey, Matt, good to see you.
Morning, Mike.
Good morning to you. And also with us, General Assignment Reporter Abigail Botar, who concentrates much of her work in the counties south of Cuyahoga. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you. Typically, I'm in Akron.
In Akron and other counties south of Cuyahoga, for sure. And Akron is south of Cuyahoga, right?
A lot of them are, yeah.
All right. In Columbus, a woman who is making a list and checking it twice, then copy-editing it, then trimming it to time, and then tracking it, and then filing it for air. The incomparable State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. Hey, Karen.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I got to get busy on Christmas stuff, don't I?
At some point, yes. It's got to be on your agenda. But you've had a lot to cover, and we're going to talk about some of that today. Let's start, though, locally with Cleveland's lakefront. The makeover took a major step forward this week when the North Coast Waterfront Development Corporation, a nonprofit created by the city, selected DiGeronimo Development of Brecksville as the master developer of lakefront transformation. It's a lakefront that now will not include a football stadium. The stadium will be demolished after the 2029 season if all goes according to plan, and the Browns will depart for a new complex in Brook Park. Abigail, what are the broad brush elements of this development? As I understand, none of it's like in stone yet, but they're saying here are things it could be.
Yeah, they're looking at housing, retail, hotels, public spaces, dining options, and then brand new being looked at for the first time as an indoor-outdoor music venue. And this is about 50 acres on the lakefront, split between parking lots on Dock 32 west of North Coast Harbor and then the land currently occupied by the Brown Stadium.
When you look at it, I mean, it's so much potential there, and it's parking lots and a stadium which had maybe eight events a year.
Right, yeah, it's so underutilized. And so there's just so much potential right now, and especially, I mean, we were looking at plans that originally did include the Brown Stadium, so now people are saying we should perhaps change them because there will be so much more lakefront accessible to view, and we don't want to block any of that. So that just opens up for a lot of more opportunities for development there.
Even before the Browns announced they were leaving, they were in league with the city to try to connect the lakefront better to downtown. There's a land bridge that's planned that'll span over the shoreway. The shoreway itself will be slowed down and slimmed down. So we're talking about this development being lakefront, but it's also one that stretches into downtown and tries to marry the lakefront with the city.
Right. It's like so disjointed right now. Like it really feels like two different places, which I feel like is probably hindering both downtown and the lakefront by not having like a nice flow of people coming to and from both areas. And so, yeah, there's like the potential of having a better public access to that area and making it a place that people really want to spend a lot of time, making it accessible for people of all income levels. It's really exciting.
DiGeronimo Companies has a development arm and others as well. It's pretty well known in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, they're currently leading more than $550 million in active development in Northeast Ohio right now, including the Gateway North mixed-use housing and retail project at John Carroll, and a mixed-use development next to the Browns headquarters and practice facility in Berea right now.
We had our Steve Litt, who writes freelance for us, do a couple of stories this week. One was his sort of review of what the lakefront could be. The other talked specifically about the DiGeronimo selection. But he mentioned the idea of it's being so important to have lake views. When they originally developed this plan, there was going to be a stadium there. So you had some housing that would be north of the stadium. If the stadium's gone and that becomes something else, then maybe that housing has to change too. What he's saying is we need to take a look at this whole plan.
Yeah, he's saying that doesn't really make sense because it would block like, I think 22 acres of lake views if it was built the way it is. And so he's kind of pitching that they take a look at that again to hopefully open up some more of those lakefront views now that there won't be a giant stadium in the middle of the plan.
There's another thing that's pretty tall and blocks views, and that's the steamship Mather. That's parked at North Coast Harbor, docked actually at North Coast Harbor. There's talk, and people seem to be receptive. The Science Museum director said, yeah, that's something we could talk about moving that.
Right, yeah. The Great Lakes Science Center owns and operates it, and they said that they're really wanting to be a good partner of better development in the area, and so they're said that it's totally open for discussion to relocate it.
So we have a lakefront that now has potential and has been underutilized. What are the planners doing to make sure that what it is not just some exclusive resort where you have to use your key card to get past the gate and you get access to the lake and the public doesn't? How are they making sure that this is something that's a benefit for the whole city?
Well, I think the first thing that they're saying they want to do is build some of those expansive public spaces to make it available to everyone. And the executive director of the Development Corporation has said that they want to begin work in the next couple of years on those public spaces. So that would be the first thing potentially open for public, and that they're trying to move mindfully and looking to attract people from all income levels, not just making this a place for ultra wealthy people to be.
Yeah, I saw there are places where you could sit and just view the lake. There's basketball courts that are imagined. There's a lot of things that could happen.
Yeah, to recreate. And I think they want mixed use housing, and so it wouldn't just be like fancy condos or something. It would be a mix of income levels, of housing available to mixed income levels.
And if you add 450 acres to that, or 400 plus acres to that, which is Burke Lakefront Airport they're talking about, we can be transformative.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
All right. At the opposite end of the city, the future costs for upkeep of Progressive Field and Rocket Arena keep rising. The stadiums are owned by the Gateway Economic Development Corporation, and they're responsible, Matt, for upkeep. It's not just building it. Those are public assets, even though the teams play there. We saw in a report this week that a ton of bills are going to be coming due, and there's not a whole lot of money to pay for them.
Yeah, so the Gateway Corporation is responsible for the capital upkeep. That is anything beyond just like regular maintenance. And what they estimate is that over the life of the two leases, which is 2036 for Progressive Field and 2034 for Rocket Arena, they're looking at a total of $400 million in upkeep. It comes out to about $17 million per stadium per year. And that is paid by the Syntax primarily.
So, yeah, it's not a surprise because this is how stadium deals are done. You have to do the capital repairs. If they come up, then, you're on the hook for it. But Gateway already, the development corporation there, has lacked money. The county and city have both put infusions in there. You said it's paid for with the Syntax, but there's a little bit of a problem with the Syntax.
Yeah, it's not keeping up with these costs. And
not enough sinning going on.
Unfortunately, no. At the present moment, there's not enough sinning going on. And, you've seen it in county council, you've seen it in city council, where there's a lot of agitation now, where they're getting a little tired of Gateway coming to them to ask for money out of the general fund. Last year was $20 million from each, or this year. And so there is growing pressure for them to figure out how to fill the gaps without coming to the general fund.
So some other thing besides a Syntax or a bigger Syntax or something.
Yeah. And if they increase the Syntax, they'll have to go to voters. And then there's other kinds of clever financing arrangements that governments can come up with, but so far nothing's been proposed.
Yeah, stadiums are not cheap endeavors.
No.
The Cleveland Teachers Union says the district needs to step up its monitoring of buildings and improve its security staffing, and the school CEO says they're doing just that. Prompting all of this was the break-in of 100 teachers' cars as they were in class. One car was stolen. Matt, these break-ins at schools, are they isolated, or are they part of this broader issue, which I know you've been looking at as a criminal justice reporter, which is cars are being broken into all over the city? Yeah,
over the last couple months, you've seen on the near west side, late at night, there have been series of break-ins where people are just going from car to car, smashing windows and seeing what's inside. There was a series of break-ins during church while people were inside at service. Cars in the parking lot were being broken into. So this has become sort of a front and center issue for law enforcement.
In some cases, smash and grabs. In other cases, just smash. It's just vandalism, and they're just making people's days bad.
Yeah, as a general rule, sort of what they assume people are looking for is a gun in the glove compartment. So a lot of cases it might just be taking a look to see if somebody's gun is sitting in the car and then moving on if it's not.
And there was an arrest this week of a young suspect.
Yeah, they picked up a 14-year-old who they say is involved in all this, and another juvenile they say is a ringleader. They found one with a bunch of guns, and so it's hard when it's juveniles to really track these cases because the juvenile court's not open the way that the regular court is, but they are making arrests.
So they're kids, and you would think, okay, it's just the aggravation of having my window broken. But what the teachers union is saying is, listen, these teachers are fearful because what we're talking about are armed young people who are searching for guns and breaking into cars. What if you came upon one as you were walking out to your vehicle? Right,
yeah, and one of the things that came out is that a lot of the cameras that are outside of school buildings aren't functioning. There's not enough security personnel to sort of have somebody stationed outside of each of these schools. So yeah, if you walk outside at the wrong time, it could be a very dangerous situation.
We've talked a lot about the flock system, which is something that reads license plates, and the city has been involved in. Former city council member is now sort of this area's salesperson for that, or marketer for that. How might flock help in this? What are they talking about using it for to stop these break-ins?
So the flock cameras, they are just stationary, and they grab a photo of every license plate and sort of a kind of broader picture of the car, so the make, the model, the color, all that stuff, and they store it. And if when cars are stolen, they'll put the license plate number into the flock system, and there'll be an alert if that stolen car's plate and description pops up on a flock camera. And so police officers will know there's a stolen car, say in this case at a CMSD parking lot, and that'll be a reason to kind of go see what's going on. And then also if you come outside at one of the schools and there's a bunch of broken windows and you have sort of a time frame, you can go into the flock system and see whose car came in the lot during sort of about what time it occurred, and then left when they were done, and you can have a good idea of the car that was involved in that, and then kind of find it elsewhere in the city as it moves around, and that'll help you make an arrest, find potential suspects, pull a car over and search it and see if there's stolen items inside of it.
In addition to the help of law enforcement, the district itself has some plans. I know that the CEO, Warren Morgan, sent a letter to teachers. What is it the district's saying it will do?
So they are trying to figure out a way to have more security at the schools, to have more of a presence. And one of the things that the head of the teachers union said is, and I think that the superintendent would agree, that with the consolidation of schools that they just voted on, it'll be easier with fewer buildings to patrol, to be able to have more regular full patrols of these lots.
Right, if they keep that many security people, if they aren't people who are also consolidated, then you'd have more security people and fewer places to patrol.
Yeah, and I mean CMSD has a police department. They could have a contract with private security, so they have options for increasing patrols, even if it's on a temporary basis.
All right. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine this week told universities and colleges to get on board with the science of reading literacy curriculum mandated by state law, or they're going to face consequences. An audit found 10 programs, including those at Cleveland State and Ohio State universities, are not fully following a 2023 state law that requires future teachers to be given instruction solely in the phonics-based system. Karen, lay out for us what science of reading is, why it's the state's choice, and why they don't want anyone even learning about anything else.
Well, the science of reading was something that the state adopted in 2023 in the budget, and a lot of states have adopted it. I think like almost 40 states across the country have adopted this. It's a phonics-based program that is rooted in phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. So basically the difference is they don't teach kids to guess words or try to figure out words from context. They really rely on phonics. And so the audit was trying to figure out what schools were still teaching the old ways of teaching reading to future teachers, which they were supposed to stop doing January 1st of this year, and teaching only the science of reading. And they found a couple of schools. There were 5 schools that were in partial alignment, meaning they still had some issues, and 10 that were not in alignment. And they said, DeWine says that those schools have to figure it out, and he's putting them on a clock.
So the science of reading sounds like the way we learn to read. It was phonics, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's gone back and forth on different ways to try to find the best way that gives the best results for the most number of kids. Because there's this period in late elementary school where you really go from reading picture books to chapter books. And if you don't read well, then you're not going to do well in middle school. You're not going to do well in high school. And that's how the slide starts. At least that's the argument for this. So really boosting reading at the early levels is considered to be incredibly important when you're teaching future teachers how to make sure that kids have that solid foundation.
And the schools that are not in compliance are not schools that don't teach science of reading. They do. It's just that they're also including these other methods.
Right. And it's not just a passing mention of something else. It's the idea that that is included as part of the curriculum, and the state wants to get that out of the curriculum entirely and get fully behind the science of reading. And it's interesting to see the schools. DeWine showed us a graph of all the schools that were in alignment, and you've got 33 out of 48 that were completely doing it right. They are no problems with that. There's 73 metrics they have to meet, and these schools were all doing it right. And then you've got partial alignment. That includes Ohio Wesleyan University, which is just north of Columbus, and Western Governors University, which you see a lot of online advertising for that, and Capital University, which has a big law school here in Columbus. But the ones that were not in alignment, I mean, Ohio State, Ohio University, University of Toledo, Wright State, Cleveland State, I mean, Bowling Green. These are the state's biggest schools, and so I thought that was interesting.
Indeed it is. And the question, though, you said they're doing it right. There are a lot of teachers who don't think that science of reading is right, that they like these other methods too. So it isn't unanimous that this is the best way or only way to teach students.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's partly why the state is really focusing on this science of reading as the way we're going to do it in Ohio. And DeWine's clock says if schools are not doing it this way, because the idea is that it's taught to future teachers so that teachers are teaching it to kids when they get into primary education. If indeed those schools are not in full alignment by the end of 2026, then there's a possibility that the chancellor could revoke approval of those literacy educator programs. And so that's considered to be, I think, a pretty big punishment for those schools because they are not in alignment.
Yeah, that's pretty big, that you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
All right,
So-
we're going to take a quick break right now. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a new multi-state voter database that Ohio is joining years after opting out of such an arrangement. And we're going to ask a little bit from Karen about why that's happening. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre with Abigail Botar and Matt Richmond of IdeaStream. State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler joins us from Columbus. And check out our weekly IdeaStream News Quiz. You'll find it at ideastream.org/quiz. It'll test your knowledge of the week's news, including several of the stories on this roundtable. We make it a game show for our monthly content staff meeting, and Connor Morris crushed the competition yesterday. Maybe you can beat Connor. Test your knowledge of the year's top stories next week, because we're going to, for the year end, give you not just the week, but the entire year. So get there today, and then next week at this time, you can get the year in review. And I wanted to share some feedback from our initial conversation about lakefront development. Got a number of emails, and what I love about getting these emails is I did not give out the email address. So you're regular listeners, and I had forgotten to do that because we have been doing some pre-records of our year-end shows where people cannot email in. But you can now, and you can join these other commenters by sending email to soi@ideastream.org. And we have a number of points here. Kathy says, does the plan envision development of Burke Lakefront Airport? It does not. That still is a matter of question and not sure whether that will become something other than an airport. William, though, says, I feel this will become a real boondoggle and keep Burke Lakefront Airport. So William's for the Lakefront Airport, and many others are not. Tom says, I don't see how a revitalized lakefront happens without turning Route 2, the Shoreway, into a tunnel. That's not planned at the moment. We've got another email, no name, says, please include a park and green space throughout the development. Yep, that is part of the plan. So we're going to put all of that to use as we continue to report on that issue, and appreciate your feedback. Again, soi@ideastream.org is the way for you to get through. The former Cleveland police officer who shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice in 2014 has been hired as a police officer again. Timothy Lohman is now working in West Virginia, according to public records published by Dragline, a nonprofit news organization associated with the American Civil Liberties Union in West Virginia. In 2014, Lohman shot Tamir Rice while he was playing with an airsoft pellet gun. Tamir died the next day. Matt, I know there have been other instances where Lohman had either was going to be hired or some other type of law enforcement, and those end up being scuttled. In this case, where is he working, and is he on duty?
So over the summer, he was hired at a skiing resort in West Virginia called the Snowshoe Resort Community District, and then also by the Gilmer County Sheriff's Office. And
So he's been there since the summertime.
Yes.
And that's not something he'd report. Like, hey, everybody, I'm a police officer again. So the complaint about it is those who were in Cleveland and experienced this tragedy believe he should never have a badge again.
Yeah, this is sort of one of the amazing things. I mean, it was 2014 when Tamir Rice died, and for the last 11 years, Samari Rice and other groups have been tracking his attempts to find new jobs. And, again and again, when somebody hires him, they are on it. They're people who are protesting locally. They're bringing attention to it. And what Samari Rice said through her attorney, Subodh Chandra, is that, he should never be a law enforcement officer anywhere in the country and should never be allowed to, carry a gun.
Do we have any indication whether the Snowshoe people didn't know about his background, or now that these protests are being brought to light that they're going to take some sort of action?
Yeah, there's, they've said that there's a review that's being done now, and there has been, some opposition to the idea of a hiring, but, I don't have all the details about how exactly his hiring was done.
And he left the Cleveland Police Department, but not right away. It was 2017. So tell me about his path out of law enforcement in Cleveland.
Yeah, the department was unable to fire him for what happened to Tamir Rice. Instead, they found that in his application, because when that happened, he was still a probationary officer, and they found that in his application, he didn't, fully divulge details of a previous attempt to be employed as a police officer in Independence, and the department there found that he was unsuitable, that he had, he cried at a gun range, that there were indications that he wasn't, fit to be a police officer, and he didn't disclose that, and so that's how they were able to fire him.
Okay. Before we get on to the next question, I mentioned Connor Morris crushed in that game show thing we had yesterday. Well, Drew Mazius is technically producing the show today, and sends me a note saying, I didn't realize I was crushed. Because he was the competitor there. Sorry, Drew. It was 6-3 with the tiebreaker there. You did a good job. You got 3 of them right. You would have gotten the other ones. He just buzzed in quicker.
Yeah, he could blame the buzzer if he wants. But
and luckily for our listeners and viewers, there is no buzzer on the online version. You have all the time you want to answer those questions. All right, moving on. Ohio has joined a new voter registration database that Secretary of State Frank LaRose said will help to ensure election integrity. He says the states in the database will remove ineligible or illegal voters through data sharing agreements. Karen, Ohio left a different database sharing program a few years ago. Why did they leave then, and then why are they rejoining a different one?
Well, they left the database that was called ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, because there were some conspiracy theories that were going around, launched by right-wing Republican advocates who said that there was involvement in that database that was inappropriate. But it was a database. ERIC had been in place since 2019. There were about 20 states that were involved in it. It was really considered a way that states could share data so that they could clean up their voter rolls, because states are required to clean up their voter rolls, get rid of duplicates and people who've died and all that stuff. That's a requirement. And to do that, you have to have data that allows you to figure out exactly who has moved away, who's duplicate registered, who's died, that sort of thing. So when they and a couple of other Republican states got out of ERIC, there was the question of, okay, how do they continue to maintain the voter rolls and share information between other states? So now Ohio has joined 10 other states in this new project, which is called Alexa, not Alexa.
Yeah, don't say that out loud. Everyone in their house right now
Right.
is having Alexa tell them something.
ELEX, capital XA, and that is the database that they're now going to rely on to do that voter roll cleanup.
I have no idea what Alexa stands for. Do you?
I mean, I think the X in there is something related to Xing out people who are not supposed to be in the system. So I guess it's just a
made-up word.
play here. Yes, exactly. It's a made-up word.
So Frank LaRose says that it's not common for people to vote in two states in the same election, even though they may have, let's say, a residence in Florida and one in Ohio. Generally, we don't see people gaming the system there, but still, this is necessary, he says, to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, voter fraud is incredibly rare. And even Frank LaRose has acknowledged that. Previous secretaries of state have acknowledged that voter fraud is extremely rare. But again, there is this requirement that voter rolls do have to be maintained. And voting more than once in a federal election is illegal. You can be fined up to $10,000, put in prison for 5 years, or both. So that is an illegal act that obviously secretaries of state and elections officials do want to prevent. And so this is a way that they say they can track this, even though it is a very rare occurrence.
So people aren't necessarily opposed to having such a database, but there is concern that what's collected might not be used responsibly.
Well, yeah, and I think that was part of the conspiracy theories that went around about ERIC before the state left ERIC. And again, that was one that had been established for a while, but it had kind of grown into popularity and widespread adoption before we got into this political climate where there are people who falsely believe that the 2020 election was stolen and things like that. So this is just a partnership among other states, and it's fairly bipartisan. We're not just talking about only Republican-led states who are involved here. I mean, you've got Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia that are joining with Ohio on this. And so, yeah, I think there were some questions about how the data was used before, and people are going to have questions about how data is used because that's kind of the environment that we're in, and people are starting to recognize that their data is incredibly important.
I love that you, just like me, say data and data interchangeably. Right. I can never, it's whatever comes out of my mouth is the way it's pronounced.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to talk about the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. It approved a 2026 budget this week that includes a combination of service cuts, restructuring, and a hiring freeze. We've talked about it before, but the budget has now been approved, and that's coming. Together, the cost-cutting measures will save the RTA more than $11 million, and RTA says it's looking for funding sources to stave off service cuts. Matt, do we know anything about what might be cut, the routes, those kind of things? It's fuzzy still.
Yeah, there's no specifics about any routes that might be eliminated, or if if it's just going to be sort of the reduction in frequency of buses and trains. It's still sort of up in the air.
And advocates are saying you should give us that information early so that we can weigh in.
Yeah, they're asking for transparency. They want to see which routes will be affected so they can take a close look at kind of who relies on them and the rationale for the routes that have been selected. And then also, they talk about finding new funding sources and what advocates have long said, because it's been an issue for years with RTA's funding kind of not being able to keep up with what they're trying to do, is that come up with a vision for what the service can look like, and then if you have to go to voters for a sales tax increase because it's funded by a portion of the sales tax, then at least you can go to them with what it could be, as opposed to just, give us some more money so we can keep kind of stumbling along the way we have been.
Gotcha. Let's move to the Regional Transit Authority in Akron, the Metro RTA. Workers there have been without a contract for nearly a year and a half. This week, pressure increased to get a contract done. Abigail, how so?
Yeah, Representative Amelia Sykes weighed in. She sent a letter to the Metro RTA CEO urging both sides to come to an agreement. And the president of the union, which is the Transport Workers Union Local 1, said that the letter shows the gravity of the situation and how important the service is to the community.
So what are they looking for? Where are the sticking points?
Wage increase, no changes to health benefits, paid sick days, and scheduled breaks are the big ones.
And there's a fact finder report coming?
Yes, and that should help them come to a possible agreement. Metro, our Zaria Johnson did a story on this, and Metro RTA gave a statement saying that their board will vote to decide if the fact finder's recommended contract is in the best interest of Metro riders in the community.
Staying in Akron, City Council President, or the Vice President, Jeff Fusco, withdrew his proposal to tighten restrictions on who can comment during public meetings. He said his intent was to keep discourse civil and not to exclude anyone from commenting, but the proposal drew protest. Can you lay out for us what the proposal was and then why he pulled it?
Yeah, so it was at its core excluding people. It was limiting public comment to Akron residents, taxpayers, utility consumers, property owners, and residents of the city's joint economic development district. So not anyone would be able to go to Akron City Council and speak in public comment. It also proposed cutting off comments if they discuss matters beyond council's authority. Councilmember Fran Wilson was one of the council members that expressed concern that the restrictions would exclude people. Council passed some restrictions in 2023 on public comment, saying it's basically limits how many people can speak.
Yeah, you can only do it once a month.
Yeah, right, which that has not been taken kindly to, especially frequenters of the public comment period. And so Vice President Jeff Fusco withdrew that this week, but he, due to these concerns that people had, and he kept saying that he didn't mean for this to be exclusionary, and other council members were saying this is at its core excluding people. So he withdrew it, but he said he's going to work with state officials and the city's law department to kind of revisit the idea next year.
Okay. Let's stay with Akron now. After 2 years of searching for a spot for a new police headquarters, Akron has decided to leave it right where it is. The Harold K. Stubbs Justice Center will undergo a $67 million renovation. Abigail, this has been 2 years, and they've looked at all these places and then kind of got back to square one.
I know. It's kind of, left us hanging there. But yeah, it's mainly budgeting. The city says that by spreading out the renovations over several years and multiple budget cycles, that they'll ultimately be able to save money. And by not vacating that building that's downtown, that means that it won't be vacant, it won't try to face demolition, it kind of preserves that building, and it's not becoming something that's like run down and vacant in downtown right now.
All right, and then let's talk about the clock tower. So every time Anna's on here, that ends up Anna Huntsman comes on, that ends up being an issue. We thought we had it once and for all. The Akron Firestone plant number 1 is gone. It's facing demolition, but now we hear again a last-ditch effort to save at least the clock tower as part of that.
Yeah, council unanimously approved a resolution urging Mayor Shamus Malik and city planning officials to at least save the front facade and the clock tower, but I think that's just kind of a request to look into that. I don't think that has any power behind it. So I guess we'll see if there's a way for the city to do that.
Okay. And in Canton, like many major districts in the region, school districts, and we've talked a lot about Cleveland lately, Canton City Schools announced this week that it must cut millions of dollars in spending in order to avoid a looming $17 million deficit in the next few years. So what did the superintendent, Jeff Talbert, say is the cause for the deficit?
It's state and federal funding cuts, and school districts across the state and many cities are facing the same deficit problem because of the state budget that passed that reduced spending for our local school districts. So Cleveland is also facing this problem. I know small districts that I've talked to students and teachers in, they are also looking at cuts to teachers and to other spending because that state money was really crucial to balancing their budget.
All right, we've got to take another quick break right now, so we're going to do that. When we come back, we've got much more to discuss with you, including a piano phenom who's just 13 years old. It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. You are back with the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre, along with Karen Kassler, Abigail Botar, and Matt Richmond. And that voice you just heard was Drew Mazius. He doesn't sound crushed. He's still okay.
I'm glad to
think
see
he's
he's
okay.
recovered.
Yeah.
He's fine. The Trump administration is ending legal status for around 500,000 Haitians living in the U.S. by February 3rd, including the more than 10,000 Haitians living in Ohio. During last year's presidential campaign, you'll remember, President Trump shared false and derogatory claims about the Haitian community working in Springfield, southwest of Columbus, near Dayton, and said that immigrants were taking over the city and eating pets. Governor DeWine, who has supported the Haitian community in Ohio, has a deep connection to the country, including the Becky DeWine schools, named after his late daughter, said he's concerned about what will happen to the Haitians in Springfield and to the overall economy in Springfield should the residents there have to leave. Karen, the Trump administration says it's revoking TPS status for Haitians who came to the U.S. to escape violence because the country no longer meets the statutory requirements. Governor DeWine says it's still a dangerous place to go.
Yeah, I remember asking him about it right after that happened, and he said that he completely disagreed, that he still has connections in Haiti. He has the school that is named for his late daughter that they had to shut down because of gang violence, and he said he's still in touch with people there, and he said it's a dangerous place, and he completely disagrees with that assessment that it's safe for Haitians to return there. But there's not much that it sounds like the state can do, because on February 3rd, Haitians do lose that temporary protected status, and that means they're illegal to work. And so they would lose the employment that they have in the Springfield area, which businesses say is really going to hurt them because they rely on those Haitians to work. And so DeWine said there are, some challenges with having Haitians working in these settings. There's language barriers and things like that. But he said they show up, they want the overtime, they pass drug tests, and that's what's important.
There were issues with driving and having proper
Yes.
licenses and those types of things too. But this was intentional. It wasn't like a bunch of Haitians just showed up. It was these companies were seeking
Yes.
them to work.
Yeah, because they were having trouble filling those positions, and they found that Haitians were willing to work and were moving to that area, in large part, I would imagine, because there were other Haitians there. And so there's a whole community there where restaurants and houses of worship and all that stuff is happening. I mean, DeWine, during the whole campaign last year, the presidential campaign, when we heard those false and racist rumors about the pet eating, DeWine went out to Springfield and like hung out with some Haitians, went to church with them and everything, and tried to send the message that no, it's wrong. But in the end, that narrative really stuck, and it obviously Trump has made the decision. His administration has made this decision, and I think the other thing that has DeWine and others worried is some of the comments that Trump has been making lately about Somalis who are living in the United States. Ohio has the second highest population of people from Somalia, next to Minnesota, which is the focus of a lot of Trump's comments about Somalis. And I think they're a little bit concerned about what's going to happen in this area here, in the Columbus area, because of that.
About a dozen Northeast Ohio organizations were awarded Ohio Historic Preservation tax credits this week, among 33 announced by the Ohio Department of Development. Receiving the maximum grant of $5 million was the West Side Market in Ohio City. The money will go toward the second stage of the planned $70 million renovation project. Also, the Cleveland Metro Parks snagged $5 million for a project in the Flats that'll create a hotel in the old grain craft silos and adjacent mill along the Cuyahoga River. Matt, what are the big plans in store for West Side Market? We've talked about it a bit before. I can't talk about it enough because I'm so excited about it. But now they're getting this historic tax credit, which will help. What are they going to do with it?
Well, so they are finishing up with renovation of the part of the market where the produce vendors work, and there will be businesses going back in there early next year, or that's the plan at least. And then next is to work on the infrastructure, to work in the sort of the basement of the West Side Market. And one of the things that a lot of vendors raised concerns about in the last few years was that the heating, the air conditioning, it's always going out, and their food, which they store in freezers down there, it's never a sure thing that it's going to kind of work.
Right.
So they're going to turn their attention there, which will really help a lot.
Yeah, and electrical as well. I've seen, extension cords going from the basement up through the whatever and getting to the vendor stands. There's a lot of work that needs to be done that we're not going to see.
Yeah, in the in sort of the bones of the building you're not going to see it, but it's going to make such a huge difference in kind of keeping that place vibrant.
Now, what we will see, though, are places where people can eat and apparently buy a beer, and there's a sort of a demonstration kitchen. It's really going to turn this into something a little different than what it has been.
Yeah. The down the road plan is to have a place where people can sit, a place where maybe there'll be events or more of a gathering place as opposed to somewhere you walk through, get your stuff, and find somewhere to sit.
Okay. I'd like to pay a little bit of tribute to Hunter Morrison, the highly regarded city planner of Cleveland for 20 years in the 80s and 90s, the longest-serving planning director in city history. He died Tuesday in his sleep at his home in Maryland, according to his family. He was 77 years old. Morrison, who was once married to former Cleveland Mayor Jane Campbell, served under former mayors George Voinovich and Michael White. He pioneered early efforts to connect downtown to Lake Erie, and he oversaw planning for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the revival of Playhouse Square, among other pivotal projects. And as a reporter who dealt with him on the regular, I can attest he was just a good guy whose word you could trust and was all in for Cleveland. And then he also, Matt, was all in for Youngstown after that and for regional planning and that type of stuff. Some real landmark developments, though, in Cleveland happened under his watch.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you read that list. And then there's also Gateway, the Key Tower, the east wing of the Cleveland Public Library main branch. So some of these, parts of downtown Cleveland that kind of have created its identity came from his time as in city government.
Yeah, great guy. All right, a little bit of feedback from our earlier conversation, and I welcome that throughout the show, soi@ideastream.org. Denise says, I'm interested to hear about how the lakefront development, specifically the music venue, will compete with Rocket Arena and Jacobs Pavilion, and if there are plans to address this. And you can add to that the House of Blues and other venues that are downtown. Will it be competition, or will it be enhancing? One of the things I heard, Abigail, is that it's indoor, outdoor, and there are going to be ticketed but also free events.
Yeah, so I feel like it wouldn't be necessarily competition, maybe more like another option for events and concerts and stuff like that. But I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see how the seating, how big it is, and what how that plays into the landscape of music venues in the city right now.
Okay. And one other email. This is from Gerald, talking about the science of reading curriculum. He says, isn't it possible that different students learn reading differently? I don't know. I'm not a professional educator, but why do politicians think they are? And that's Jerry's point of view. Again, we welcome yours. SOI@ideastream.org is the way to get through. So you're saying there's a chance. This week, the Cleveland Metro Park shared on Instagram photos and videos of a Fisher cat. It's actually just a Fisher. People call it a Fisher cat. It's not a cat at all. From a trail cam earlier this year. It's actually not at all a cat. Look, it's on the screen right now, you guys. It's not at all a cat. It's what some colloquially would call it. But it marked the first sighting of a Fisher in Cuyahoga County in 200 years. It's amazing. Fishers are carnivorous members of the weasel family, and they live in wooded areas, like some of my cousins. Anyway, Abigail, while the sighting in Cuyahoga County was first this month, Fishers have been coming back for a while, and they're not small.
No, and their tails are so long. So their bodies are 20 to 25 inches, and then their tails are an additional 13 to 16 and a half inches. And I couldn't really picture that. And then I started looking at that video, and I was like, yeah, it keeps going. And they can weigh between 3 and 15 pounds, which is a big, it's a big stretch of
yeah, exactly.
pounds. But
I'm not, I guess it's good that something came back that you never knew existed. They're awfully excited about it. The fact that the trail cams picked this up.
Yeah, I feel like the Cuyahoga River and a lot of places in Northeast Ohio are such like international examples of how an environment can be revitalized. And so I feel like anytime there is an example of wildlife that had been pushed out as long ago as 200 years ago, that's just so crazy. It was pushed out by the way that we settled this area. It coming back, I think, means to the people that work in the metro parks and naturalists and hobbyists
that they got jazzed
they're doing something right and something good is happening.
And it seems like something's being done right in a number of counties in Northeast Ohio. A number of species are making their return.
Yeah, I mean, well, so there've been 40 confirmed sightings of the Fisher across Northeast Ohio, just none in Cuyahoga County until now. And then I guess the populations of black bears, badgers, weasels, and bobcats have also been expanding, and those also have not been seen in Ohio like typically for like 200 years. So it's kind of crazy.
All right. Karen, I wanted to jump back real quick and talk about e-check, which everyone loves.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
Oh, yeah.
Ohio lawmakers wanted to scrap the actual emissions testing and allow drivers instead to sign a form attesting the vehicle's emission control systems were working. Abigail, I'll throw this to you first. The EPA denied Ohio's attempt to end the e-check as we've known it for decades. They said, no, you can't just sign a form saying my car is fine.
Right. This just reminded me that I need to get my car e-checked and I need to get my registration before my birthday next month.
We're a public service right
Thank you
here.
so much. I literally just saw my life flash before my eyes. Yes, I mean, this is such a thing. Like, I grew up in Lake County, which isn't necessarily even a urban community, but we have to have e-check there too, and it was just such the bane of everyone's existence there. And doesn't it not cover Franklin County?
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
It does not.
It's just
No.
so silly.
Yeah,
Only
Karen-
Northeast Ohio.
Karen says
So
very
silly.
smugly.
So silly. Anyway, I
Well,
mean, I'm
well,
all
the-
for not
Go ahead.
emitting pollution into the environment, but it doesn't really seem like it's not very a concerted effort. But obviously, the EPA is not going to want us to to get rid of
Well,
that.
the politicians that do want it gone, Karen, say the environment's already tons cleaner than it was when e-check was put in, that it's a burden, that it's people have to go and get them checked, and there's a cost to that in terms of your license sticker and all of that. But their argument went on deaf ears. They're not done, though. They want to appeal even higher with the EPA and perhaps to the president.
Yeah, and I mean, they are correct. The environment is a lot cleaner, and arguably that's because of e-check. And so there's a public comment period that apparently is going to happen here so that people who are in the area can submit a comment on this decision, on the state's request to make that go away. But yeah, I think they want to continue on that with that because there are some lawmakers who really want to see e-check go away. They think it's done its job, and they believe it's cumbersome to people. But, you know, it has worked. That's the other argument there.
Are
Right.
those lawmakers all people that live in Northeast Ohio that don't want to
Not
do
necessarily,
e-check
though.
anymore?
One of them
Okay.
is Bill Romer, right, Karen? And
Yes. Who's
in
from Richfield.
He's from
right.
Northeast
So he's
Ohio,
he's a Northeast Ohioan for sure.
But I think it's that whole idea of, you know, why is this happening only in Northeast Ohio? If it's a good idea, should it be through the whole state? And why should the state be doing this?
All right. We want to end the show with a couple of stories that are about inspiring young people. In Stark County, 9-year-old Zach Bucklew is the newest member of the Walsh University Cavaliers football team. Yep, at 9. He signed a letter of intent with the team this week. Doctors diagnosed Zach with leukemia last year, and Team Impact connected him with Walsh as part of its mission to create sports-focused experiences for children with serious illnesses. Signing with the football team, Matt, I would think, is quite an experience.
Yeah, and hopefully he has access to NIL dollars. To maybe
Yeah, that would be an experience for sure. Yeah, great stuff. And then also, last night, a teenage guy, barely, he's just 13, piano prodigy from Lakewood, made his debut at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Mikey Klein told our Kabir Bhatia earlier this week that he loves classical music. Frédéric Chopin is his favorite. He also loves another musician who got his start listening to the classical composers, Billy Joel. And I saw that story and I thought, my gosh, 13 and he's playing at Carnegie Hall. He only started playing like 3 years ago. I don't know if you saw Kabir's story, but it's just an incredible young kid from Lakewood.
Wow. There's just some people where they just were meant to play the piano.
Yeah,
Like-
or whatever their talent is, but they
Right.
pick it up and suddenly it's
It
there.
just snaps way later than people that have worked decades at it.
Yeah. Karen, you started playing piano at what, 4?
5 actually,
Okay.
and I'm nobody's inviting me to play at Carnegie Hall. I'll tell you that.
You're not going to be at Carnegie Hall. Okay. Well, maybe in your own home.
No, I don't even play anymore because I'm just not that good.
All right.